and I will make you co-host.
Okay.
All set.
All right. Thank you, Clerk Semino. It now being 6:30 on Wednesday, July 22nd of 2020. We are here to begin the meeting of the Committee of Ordinance and Rules of the Braintree Town Council. Clerk Semino, can we please have a roll call vote to begin the meeting?
Councilor Ringus,
Aye.
Councilor Sasha,
Here.
Councilor Flaherty,
Here.
and Councilor Mackin.
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Clerk Semino. If we can just take a moment to have a moment of silence for all our men and women uniformed serving here and abroad. Thank you. Moving on to our approval of minutes. Our last meeting was on April 22nd of 2020. Those are the minutes we are moving to approve tonight. Do I have a motion as such?
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilor Sasha. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilor Mackin. Clerk Semino, can we have a roll call vote?
Councilor Ringus,
Aye.
Councilor Sasha,
Yes.
Councilor Flaherty,
Yes.
Councilor Mackin.
Aye.
4 in favor, 0 opposed.
And that is unanimous. Thank you, Clerk Semino. We have no old business tonight. We will be moving on to our new business, which is Mayor's Order 20044, Amendment to the Town Zoning Map, General Business District, Liberty and Grove Streets, or taking up any action relative thereto. Just so everyone who is on the panel, and I believe we have at least 7 other attendees tonight, the way this works is we are just one subcommittee of the full council. We're going to hear, I'm sure, a little explanation. This proposal has recently gone before the planning board. It now comes before the Ordinance and Rules Subcommittee. At some point tonight, we will take a vote, whether that be favorable or in the negative. But whatever happens tonight, this does get referred back to the full council for a full public hearing and a full vote by all 9 members of the council. And that is scheduled at this point, if there's no changes along the way, have a public hearing on August 4th at 7:30 p.m. With that, I would turn it over to Ms. Santucci-Rousey and Ms. Stickney, and I know Attorney Goldrosen is with us today, just to go over what exactly we're looking to rezone tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Ordinance and Rules. I'm here this evening on behalf of Mayor Kokoris. I think everyone on the panel and those in attendance this evening are aware of the recent efforts undertaken by the town staff in conjunction with the applicant, Liberty Grove LLC, who's also here with us this evening. We held an informational Zoom session back on June 23rd. And subsequent to that, the planning board, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, held their public hearing on July 14th and issued a favorable recommendation. All the materials shared with the planning board, including plans and narratives, as well as the planning staff report and the planning board report, have all been forwarded to the full council, and that is in your possession. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, is I'd like to share my screen and put up the rezoning map, and then I'll sort of narrate with that, and then we can take any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rosen.
And just bear with me, please. Sometimes I don't get it the first try. Can someone allow me to share my screen? I'm disabled right now on screen sharing.
I think Clerk Semino looks like she's working on that right now.
Thank you.
Clerk Semino, I think you're muted.
Okay, try now.
Yep, I should be good. Let me try now. Okay. All right, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna kind of zoom out so we can get a better frame of reference, and then I'll zoom in a little bit closer. So What you have in front of you is a map depicting the entirety of the 3 parcels, which is 357 Grove Street, 365 Grove Street, and then 1006 Liberty Street. The rezone is focused on the front portion of the property, north of the wetlands and including a portion of the wetlands. And I will zoom in a little bit so we can see that a little bit closer. As you can see on the map here, we have quite a bit of lines and some different shading. We have some shading that is shown in orange on the corner of Liberty and Grove Street that represents about 14,409 square feet. And that area is the current general business zone. Then we have an area to the east, fronting on Grove Street, that is currently Residence B. And that area is about 12,734 square feet, proposed to be rezoned from Residence B to general business. If we move in the opposite direction, sort of on the west, west-south of the current general business area on the corner, we also have some existing Residence B zoning. That area represents about 6,878 square feet, again, proposed to be rezoned to general business. And then the portion in the middle of the site here, and again, towards the west, is the current existing Residence A area that represents about 33,825 square feet. So if you add up the areas that are currently zoned Residence B, we'd be looking to rezone a total of 0.46 acres of Residence B area to general business. And then if you look at the Residence A portions, that totals about 0.77 acres. And the total rezone, all of the Residence B, in addition to the Residence A, totals about 1.23 acres to be rezoned. If that is successfully rezoned, it will represent a development site on the corner of Liberty and Grove Street it is approximately 1.55 acres. That's basically the application that has been co-submitted by Mayor Kokoris and Liberty Grove LLC. I have quite a bit of other information. I'm not sure what the questions might be, but if you want to start with questions, or if you'd like me to talk more, whatever you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
What I'll probably do at this point, and I thank you for that presentation and sort of showing us in detail exactly what's being rezoned. I'm going to open it up to questions from the counselors. Obviously, I know we have 7 attendees, it looks, in addition to our panelists. A lot of this was discussed at the planning board meeting, which I believe was last week. What I'll do is I'll open it up to the counselors first to have their questions answered, and then we'll go from there. So with that said, do any counselors wish to be heard? You can raise your hand if you want. And Sue, is there a way we can take that down just so I can see everybody's head again?
Melissa, do you want to?
Yes, I can. Yep. Sure. I can stop share.
Okay. Thank you so much. Just so I can see
You're
everybody.
welcome.
I believe I would call on Councilor Flaherty has raised her hand. Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you. I'm looking for some clarity on the answers to some questions that I just got, like, I don't know, a couple of hours ago in my email. So I haven't had a lot of time to go through this, but a question was asked about traffic. And, you know, I always assumed that a residential complex as large as the one that is being proposed through 40B would, of course, involve less traffic than a CVS. But in the answers to the questions that I just received, it looks like a CVS will actually create additional traffic over and above what's there now and over and above what a residential complex would provide. So I'm looking for further information on that because traffic is an awfully big deal on that intersection. There's lots of accidents already, and so that's an area of serious concern.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, address Councilor Flaherty's question.
Thank you, Ms.
So there have been some questions from some of the counselors, and there were responses provided, guaranteed. I mean, yes, they were today, but in advance of the meeting. What I have done is we have some information related to traffic from other CVSs in the community. And the CVS in the AM peak hour will produce about the same amount of traffic as the CVS will produce the same as the 96 residential units. And then in the evening peak hours, there will be additional trips above and beyond what a CVS would generate. I do not have a traffic study for this proposed CVS. Some of the points that I think are important to add is that CVS does desire, this was one of the questions, to be located on high traffic volume streets. And the reason that they do that is because they pull a lot of vehicles from what we call pass-by trips. So people that are already in the network going home and either driving by this specifically and they stop, and or they divert, say they're on Liberty Street and they're heading north or south and they take a right-hand turn and they visit this location. Residential trips are what we call destination trips. And those are new trips from new residents that will be living in the area that whose ultimate destination and end trip is getting to their home. So the answer is the AM peak hour will be about the same, and the evening peak hour will be additional trips above and beyond what a residential complex will produce.
So in terms of the volume of traffic on Liberty and Grove, I'm trying to understand the distinction between the traffic generated by a residential complex and the traffic generated by a CVS. You're saying a CVS draws in traffic that's already going by, whereas a residential complex produces additional traffic.
It's a different type of trip. When you look at traffic impact assessments and they characterize trips, we have pass-by trips, and there are certain use categories that traffic professionals use that contribute, that the site-generated trips are from pass-by trips. But going home at night and going to your home is your destination. That's a destination trip. Another example I could make that might provide more clarity would be if you look at something like a CVS or something like a furniture store. A furniture store is a destination trip. You're driving to that store to get furniture. And while there are trips that are going to be destination trips to CVS, they also pull from what we call pass-by trips. So somebody going home at night up Grove Street visits this property.
So when you're comparing pass-by trips and destination trips, and the residential units generate destination trips, whereas CVS counts on pass-by trips.
A portion of pass-by trips. There will be destination. There will be people that leave their house just to drive to CVS, but there will also be people that are already driving by there that will utilize those. Things like supermarkets, gas stations, convenience stores. They generate trips onto their property in and out of their curb cuts from cars that are already driving by.
Okay, but I'm looking for you to characterize the number of cars on the road. Can you put it in those terms? Like in terms of generating more cars on the road, can you create a comparison?
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, I'm trying to understand the question.
Ms. Stickney?
I think one thing that we want to keep in mind is that there is a CVS now across the street in that shopping plaza. So there is some existing traffic that will just be relocated to the other side of the street when it moves from the plaza to the Shell station. So there's usually some credit given to what is in the flow as it goes by. But as far as the overall pattern to figure out how many cars are on the street are heading to CVS, Melissa can answer it, but the ITE manual gives us some guidance on that. That's not a defined science that we would know exactly.
Yes, we don't have, and thank you very much, Christine. We don't have this specific traffic report. Other information that I can share is that they typically say that 25% of the trips on and off the site are pass-by trips. So if there's 100 trips in a peak hour, I'm just using round numbers, 25 of those would already be driving by. That's an industry standard that you'll see in traffic reports for uses that draw from trips already in the network.
Okay, so 75% of the trips are destination trips for the CVS, but some measure of those trips are already being made to the CVS at Stop and Shop Plaza, and we just don't know what that would be.
As far as trip, are you asking me like volumes, specific numbers?
The concern I hear from residents all the time has to do with backups on Liberty and Grove and in both directions. And so the concern is which one is going to generate a higher volume of traffic. And you're characterizing it in terms of pass-by trips versus destination trips. And I'm not clear on which one of those creates more cars on the road.
So, okay, so for example, I don't even know how to further describe this. I mean, in the morning peak, so for example, in the morning peak hour, when I said it was going to be the same amount of trips. So again, we'll just use round numbers. These are not the volumes, but round numbers. 100 trips. If there's 100 trips coming out of the residential complex, and then there's 100 for CVS, 25 of the CVS ones are already driving by.
Oh, I'm starting to understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And if I'm not explaining it good, continue to ask questions. I'm just trying to break it down. So, and again, for example, you commute on Grove Street and you're like, oh, I need a card for my coworker. So you pull into CVS versus I live there and I have to go to work. I am my destination is my work that morning. I might be a pass-by trip to that person could be a pass-by trip to Dunkin' Donuts or Starbucks or a gas station or something further in their trip. Somebody else could be taking credit for them. But when we're looking at these two side by side, that's I guess the best way, one of the better ways to describe it.
Okay, so your answer to the question, as it was written in the email, is that based on the counts we have from the CVS at Cape and Circle, a pharmacy could potentially generate the same number of morning peak hour trips as a 96-unit residential development.
Yep.
But what you're qualifying that with now is that some of those would be pass-by trips.
I didn't even factor frankly, I just grabbed some numbers that I had from the monitoring report for the CVS up at Cape and Circle. And based on that report, they had 35 trips on and off the site in the morning. And again, some of those people already driving by, we could say, yes, up to 25 of those 35. The projections for the 40B, and that traffic study is available on the website, it's been on our webpage for some time, is 33 AM trips coming out. So 35 with 25 that could be passed by, and then 35. So we're talking about, there's two different functions. There's cars on the road, and then there's people turning in and out of these curb cuts. And out of those cars on the road for the CVS, out of the 35, some of them could already be driving by versus getting up in the morning from your house and driving to CVS. Some of them I'm sure are employees, and then again, some destination trips.
Okay, because it was very concerning because you added that, however, the evening peak volumes
Will be more.
for a CVS could be higher than for a residential development.
That's correct.
But
That
when
is
you
correct.
say peak volumes, you're not talking about the actual number of cars on the road. You're talking about the number of turns in and out of the parking lot.
That's correct. I'm not talking about traffic volumes on the road. I'm talking about when we look at traffic impacts from new developments, we look at the existing volumes on the road. Then we look at how many trips could be generated by a development, whether it's retail or residential. And then those trips are added into the existing baseline conditions, and projections are made for the future conditions. So you establish your baseline, you say, what is this development going to produce? You add those trips into the network, how they're going to be distributed, and then you come up with the new volumes that will be on the street and how they will impact or not impact intersections and turning movements in the vicinity of a development.
So is it your opinion, based on your understanding of these patterns, that a CVS will not create as much congestion on Liberty and Grove as a set of residential units would?
As far as congestion and level of service and the distribution, that information I don't have. As far as where will people be coming out on Liberty, going left or right? Will people be coming out of Grove, left or right? The locations of the curb cuts are not finite, and the distribution patterns I do not have for that CVS location. So I have data from other CVSs for a volume comparison, but I can't speak to a CVS at this location and its distribution patterns, because that would impact. So if you have 35 cars coming off, if they go left, if they go right, if they go north or go south, that distribution pattern, when you divvy it up about the 35 cars, depending on where they're going, may or may not impact an intersection at a different rate, I guess I should say.
Okay, so the impact on the intersection is important to me. Is that information that can be provided to the council before a vote was taken?
No.
No.
No, a full comprehensive traffic study for a development, and the applicant is here this evening and can probably speak to this. That isn't something that would be prepared at this point. The property is not even zoned for that use at this time. My understanding is when and if the zoning is in place, and when and if the community preservation purchase is acted favorably upon, at that point is when details and traffic studies are very, very, very detailed. The information I'm giving is based on knowledge in the community and other locations, but I cannot comment on the distribution patterns at this particular location. I don't know if the applicant has anything that they want to add.
Can I speak first?
Councilor Mackin, I'll get to you right after Ms. Flaherty if she's finished with her questions. And Ms. Flaherty, you'll always be able to come back for a second time if need be.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. So with Ms. Flaherty conceding the floor, I would turn to Councilor Mackin for comments and questions.
Yes, I had raised my hand prior to when we started Ms. Flaherty, which we'll get to that issue later. But, to address the traffic, no matter what goes there, there's going to be an increase in traffic. I think, whether it's a slightly, as Ms. Stickney already pointed out, there is a CVS in the area, whether there may be a slight discrepancy between the two. Yeah, it's possible. There is plans from the state to widen that intersection and alleviate traffic as is. I know Ms. Flaherty, Councilor Flaherty said she is concerned about the traffic in that area. However, it is my district. I spoke to the residents who live around there. I have not heard a single person say we would rather have a 40B there because the CVS is going to generate more traffic. The reaction is overwhelmingly positive, and I think we're just going down a rabbit hole here for no real reason. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Mackin. Councilor Shasha, do you have any questions or comments you'd wish to add? You're currently muted.
I do. Yes, thank you, Chairman Rangus. Just to follow up on the traffic thing, just real briefly, I would just note, I believe that the CVS in Cape and Circle has one entrance and exit. And this one, although nothing's been decided, and I know it has two, but they're both on the same street, right?
I'm looking at the traffic report and it references 3. There's 2 in front of the building and then there's 1 behind it.
Right, but they're all on the same street.
They're all on Church Street, correct?
Right.
Yes.
And so my only point would be, if this generates roughly equal numbers of cars in and out, it could actually be half on Grove and half on Liberty, because there would be an entrance on both streets. right?
Yes, that could happen. That's actually a good point. Council Sasha, is that's where we get into the distribution patterns and where are the people that are going to be going to the CVS? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from Weymouth? Are they coming north on Liberty? Are they coming south? And that all really makes a difference. Are they making a through movement? Are they making a right into the site, a left? All of that sort of plays into it. And, frankly, when we get to that point, which is going to be during the site plan review, what is going to be required of the applicant is, and those that are familiar with the planning board and our mitigation and how we go about that, is we look for the level of service to be maintained at the intersections. So that is something that will be discussed and 99.9% required. So meaning that depending on these new trips and their distribution pattern and where they fall in the network in that intersection, timing will be adjusted, phases could be adjusted. Council Mackin mentioned the widening, that was mitigation for another project that the planning board approved. Whether or not that's going forward is unknown at this time. But all of those things are things that will be looked at, and if needed, will be mitigated. That's just basically how it works. You can't introduce an extreme amount of volume into a network and create impacts and not mitigate it. And there have been situations where, depending on where the business is located and the volumes and the type of business, where you add a small amount of trips and there's an impact, or you could add a significant amount of trips with no impact and a very good network that maybe is not at capacity and has the ability to handle additional queues without creating additional delays. So moving that traffic through the network is how you minimize delays and maintain the level of service.
Okay, thank you. And my only other question is, if this were not part of a 40B proposal, and if we were just looking at any property in town, it seems to me like part of the issue with this property is the split zoning that's there now. The general business lot is really too small to provide any kind of real retail building. And, today's retail stores are all big. Nobody builds little tiny stores anymore. CVS, all the stores you look at are big. I wonder, in your opinion, is it likely that we would, if we did not rezone this, and for some reason the 40B didn't go through, is it likely that we would see anything ever develop there, or is it going to be an empty gas station forever? Because leaving aside the whole 40B issue, it seems like this lot is too small as it is and needs some rezoning regardless of everything else.
I want to address that briefly, and then I'd like Mr. Clemens to answer the question about the development. So the area that is general business isn't even big enough to have a conforming general business lot. So you need 15,000 square feet to have anything that even starts to conform with the ordinance. So the existing general business portion, if that was a lot on its own, is not buildable because it's not big enough. And then I guess I would turn it over to Mr. Clemens as to the, if this doesn't happen, what is going to happen?
Thank you, Melissa. George Clements, Liberty Grove. Councilor Sasha, to answer your question, is inevitably something will be developed there. And although the general business zone is undersized, that was an error on the part of the town during, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So looking back on history, and we did our due diligence as part of the purchase on this property, and you're welcome to do it as well. Back in 1959, the parcel was rezoned to accommodate for general business. Thus, the gas station was installed. And amazingly, when they rezoned the property, they only rezoned a portion, but the portion that they did rezone to general business, zoning bylaws may have been different at that time, but where they placed the actual gas station, ironically enough, is not even in the general business zone. But to get to the crux of the question is, ultimately, it's not a small area. We have over 3.35 acres. So, you know, I wouldn't be so quick to put the 40B aside if it wasn't developed, because we've spent a lot of time, effort, and due diligence in that process. Ultimately, you know, we've offered to the community multiple different variants, you know, different solutions, be it a Cumberland Farms, be it senior housing, be it, you know, and it's been a 3-year process. You know, I will say I was very reluctant in the beginning to enter into the negotiation to compromise after the 3 years of trying to bring the community together in a spirited direction. But amazingly enough, and all credit due to the mayor, his administration, and certainly Melissa and Christine, and you folks as well, I've become very, very much intrigued with the notion and the alternative deal that we've put in place. And, you know, we can all talk about traffic, but as a practical matter, and I look at it as a practical matter, is, you know, traffic is inherently a problem. And the only way you're going to mitigate traffic on a state highway, and you know, let's not fail to forget, this is a state highway. So we can't rely that the state's coming in and making improvements to you know, to ease that congestion in the area. And I've said this from day one since I've purchased this property. The best thing that this community and this town can do is to work closely with the developer and seek mitigation. Mitigation is not just affordable housing. It can be traffic improvements, things of that nature. Now, that said, to answer your question, there will be a development there. I am very confident that it will be 96 units if it's not the CVS. And I hope that that's a clear explanation. But, you know, 3 years in this process, and again, many accolades to everybody involved. You know, I know there's concerns over certain things, but if we're going to move forward as a community, we need to do it. This is a unique opportunity whereby I am approved with the state to move forward on a comprehensive permit. I've taken a pause. I'm respectful of community concerns and things like that, but I feel as though we're going down a rat hole talking about things that are not engineered. You know, for instance, I've read letters from the abutters attorney, and I understand the concerns. Those are valid, and I don't discount them. However, it's not for an attorney, it's not for me, it's for qualified professionals to design and develop a plan that conforms. So I think we need the process to play out. And I guess to reiterate, 100% a 3.35 acre site on the corner of Liberty and Grove will be developed. My first intention was never 40B, as expressed through the 3 years that I've carried this and paid the real estate taxes. As everybody told me, it was not a commercial use. Certainly the town enjoyed the commercial tax rate that I've been paying. So I would caution you folks that I think we're going in the wrong direction. I think, you know, a lot of time, effort, and thought has been put into not design, not overall design, because it was premature. I think what we've tried to do is space planning, to say, okay, we need to rezone so that we can find a business, whether it be CVS, whether it be something else, something that could actually function in a healthy capacity. And I think we've done that through this process. So I'd ask tonight that we don't get too boggled down in the details of traffic. We rely on the professionals and the engineers to give us that at a later date. I hope that's informative. And if I went a little further than I should, I apologize, but I just want to be clear on that.
Thank you, Mr. Clements, for your comments. Before I comment or question, I will defer my comments right now to see if anyone else from the councilors wishes to speak again. I see that Councilor Flaherty has raised her hand. Councilor Flaherty, I would recognize you for the second time.
Thank you. There are reasons to do this that I can see, and there are also reasons not to do it. And the reasons not to do it have to do with what message are we sending to every developer in the local area. And there are developers who own land in Braintree that's not zoned for what they would like to do with it. And this is a terrible strategy for managing that kind of development, doing this kind of rezoning after somebody has something that it's not zoned for. This sends a message to developers that they can buy whatever they want in Braintree, and then if they use 40B as a tool, as a threat, then the town will just capitulate and rezone for whatever it is that they want. Now, I know that the idea of a 40B on that intersection is enormously unpopular, and I concede that there are strong reasons why I think it doesn't belong there. But I'm looking at the two as a comparison, and I think that it's that I'm not hearing that there is a strong traffic reason to put a CVS in there, and I'm looking for information now on what would be the financial impact on the town of the two different projects. How much, if we're going to have a CVS, how's that going to impact the town financially? And if we're going to have residences there, how's that going to impact the town financially? Give me a reason to do this when I know that it's going to crop up again, because developers will do this again. They will do it every time.
If I may?
Actually, I'm gonna hold you for a second, Mr. Clements, because I'm gonna defer off of Ms. Flaherty. Councilor Mackin had his hand up first using the raise hand mechanism, and then Ms. Stickney actually raised her hand, so I'll get to her after that. So first to Councilor Mackin.
To what Councilor Flaherty was just saying, that I did have that mindset at one point. I'm sure George is well aware of that through the community meeting we had in February. And I do, she does raise some valid points. However, I think we do need to look at the situation at hand. And, Mr. Clement's been very clear, like the 96 units are coming. The people in that neighborhood, Melissa, Christine, other people in the mayor's office worked very hard to give us this opportunity to avoid that. And unfortunately, while principles can be important, situations change, and this is where we are right now. And I think we got to go with what the people who live right there and will have to deal with this every day feel. In which case, we got to put some principles possibly aside and deal with the situation at hand. That's all I got.
Thank you, Councilor Mackin. I will defer over I'll turn to Ms. Stickney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of points that I wanted to bring out. Prior to the application for the 40B, we were working on a comprehensive zoning project in the town, which I'm sure everyone's very well versed on. And we targeted certain parcels for rezones, and this was one of those parcels that was targeted for a rezone. If you think about what could go there today under the current zoning, it's very possible it's not the size of the building that's on the property, but more the use. And in a world where we're staying in our cars a lot more and using drive-through windows and things that remotely take us away from going into the stores, you could have a use that has that kind of drive-through window scenario, a kiosk, coffee kiosk, or something that has it on both sides. So I think to say that something would never go there, my staff and Melissa, when we've had inquiries when it was on the market, we tried to look for a low generating traffic user to have it, be looked at for that property. And so that is why we before this discussion had targeted the property for a rezone. So I just think people need to kind of keep that in mind, and also consider the aesthetics of the area. A single story CVS versus a multi-story residential large massing building at a corner of a busy street. I mean, the rezone is a little bit more than traffic. That's a legitimate concern, but there are other items to be thought about when you're looking at the overall property in the rezone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stickney. I would note that Councilor Shasha has raised his hand through the raised hand function. So Councilor Shasha? Yeah, you're muted.
Sorry, no, I can defer. I know Mr. Clements wanted to speak as well. I can wait.
I'll defer back to Mr. Clements after you if you'd like to go first.
No, he had raised his hand first.
So Councilor Shasha yields his time to Mr. Clements. the applicant.
You know, I understand the concerns about, you know, are we setting a precedence? Well, I don't think we are because of the following. This property historically from its inception has been developed as a commercial property. It always contained in excess of 2 acres of land. This property is also on a state highway, which is in a 4-corner business district. To say that the threat of a 40B is causing the rezone, I think that in itself is problematic because the town in 1959 recognized that entire corner is a business hub. I think emotions ran high, and I tried to work diligently with the community and explain this, that if you look at this as a practical matter, which I never seem to get any momentum on, you have any 4-corner intersection in any community where there are businesses on all 3 corners, and unfortunately the ATM site across the street has now fell into a defunct stage. To say that to come in and threaten 40B sets a bad precedence, I would agree if this property was in a residentially zoned neighborhood. This is a quintessential hub of business. We started off, we purchased a site with the intention, it was a gas station we were looking to enhance or redevelop it into a nicer gas station. We were met with resistance. We worked with the community and we gave them an opportunity and said, okay, let's look at a 55 plus option. So, you know, to say that the process has been, I came in and, or, you know, to suggest that I came in and dropped a 40B only to get a rezone, I think is not entirely, is far from factual. I think we've given the community opportunity after opportunity. Now, I understand if this were in a residential neighborhood, if it was further up Liberty Street, then I would agree. It's not an appropriate place. I will say, amazingly enough, through this process, I've seen more support for the 40B, and that's perplexing to me. And maybe we should reevaluate our position and look at, you know, as the councilor said, maybe it does set bad precedents, and maybe we need to take a step back and have a larger discussion if that's what the council feels needs to be done. But I will tell you, we've exhausted a lot of time and a lot of financial resources, and we've spent 3 years trying to work through this. So we can discuss and talk about what precedents it sets. I think the precedence that was set was the just say no to everything movement that brought us to spend tremendous amount of time and financial resources to be forced into a situation, quite frankly, to file for a 40B. And I think the community in the town is recognizing that, you know, if I were another developer, I may not be so willing to say, I have an approval through the state right now to get 96 units. I believe in the mayor, I believe in the planning staff, and I believe in some of the feedbacks that I got that is not the right project. Something is happening, and something will happen on this property in August. There is no question about it. I, as a Braintree resident, with my children being educated through the Braintree school systems, who owns quite a bit of real estate in Braintree, does not believe that 96 units is the right project on that corner. That is a business hub. And for anybody to suggest that 96 units is appropriate is surprising to me, but maybe we should be reevaluating that. I'll leave that with you folks, but I am open to anything. To end, I am surprised at the lack of support from the general public for this alternative proposal, quite frankly. And I am more than committed to the 96 units if, in fact, that's the direction we want to head. But make no mistake, come August, we're going in one direction or the other. That's not a threat. That is a business decision that has been made on my end because I'm the landowner and I'm the person that funds the taxes and everything else that goes with it. 3 years of opportunity missed by the community. This is the last opportunity for us to work as collectively and the community to have the ability to have input, to question traffic. For all of the things we're talking about, it's amazing that we're here tonight talking about traffic impacts. This is a grand opportunity for the community to engage and be part of this process yet again. So I would encourage, I'd encourage you folks to support us, or if we need to take a step back, I'm willing to do that as well. But I'll leave it at that this evening, and I thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. I would also note, just for the record, that Attorney Modestino, who represents Mr. Clements, is a panelist on the call as well. And although we haven't heard from him yet, Attorney Goldrosen for the town is here as well. Councilor Shasha does have his hand raised. I would defer to him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Ms. Stickney. I think you made my point better than I did earlier, which is that we would be looking, it would make sense to look at rezoning this property, even if this whole other discussion wasn't happening. That's something that's been looked at in the past. And I think these other issues are clouding it, this versus that. But the other thing I would point out is that this is not CVS versus 40B. This is CVS plus preservation of a historic building and almost 2 acres of open space. And the town has been building up millions of dollars in its CPA fund with almost no ability to spend that money on open space. It's been very limited, the amount of open space we've been able to purchase. This is a rare opportunity to get a good bit of open space abutting residential neighborhoods. And I think that makes this proposal a lot more attractive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shasha. I hadn't spoken yet, so I will take the opportunity to ask some questions and some comments. And I think I'll piggyback a little bit on what Councilor Shasha just said. I agree, there is sort of a threefold thing going on here. We are preserving some open space, which will help in future calculations. We are preserving a historical building in the town of Braintree, which I will have a question about, and I don't know if there'll be an answer about that tonight. And we are creating something that, in essence, I think, as Mr. Clements said, this particular parcel has had this very storied and controversial history, because it was going back to, I believe, 1959, as Mr. Clements said. It was zoned oddly, and the gas station was situated oddly within the zone. So as Ms. Stickney and Ms. Santucci-Rosie have said, this is something that was going to have to be redistricted in some way, because there's really no use for it. And Councilor Sasha probably said that a little more eloquently. In terms of some of the questions that I have, and this would go to some of our town officials, I have had a couple of questions from folks in the last couple of days in terms of the preservation of space and in terms of the preservation of that sort of historical home. Do we know what the preservation of the historical home would look like, what the plans are for sort of preserving that that piece of property?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Stickney.
I think at this point, the proposition to the CPA is to use the unreserved budget account, but for the purpose of historical preservation, open space, and potentially community housing, so that we can have those discussions once the land has been purchased as to how we can do, some preservation on the house. We want to talk with some of the stakeholders in the area, the Historic Commission, and talk with the Conservation Commission about the open space. Those discussions haven't happened yet, but we just left it available so that we could call upon it for those uses.
Okay, thank you. And again, I would defer here either to, I think, Ms. Stickney or Ms. Santucci-Rosie, or even Mr. Goldrosen. In terms of, obviously, this, and this is for kind of think for the general public, because these are some of the questions I've gotten as well. This isn't the end all be all. We are moving from our committee tonight to affirmatively or negatively make a recommendation as to rezoning this property, which the town council as a full whole will address in terms of whether or not that actually goes through. But that doesn't, again, end this, and we've sort of alluded to that a little bit tonight. There are site and reviews, and there are other studies that are going to follow. Can either Ms. Rosie or Ms. Stickney, just for the general public, just explain a little bit about what a site plan review is and how that works going forward, and how that plays into what we're doing tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may address that. So it is a very multi-step process. We're at the subcommittee level right now on the rezone. We also need to have the meeting with the Community Preservation Committee, which will be Monday evening. Then we'll be back at Ways and Means on next Tuesday evening to discuss that purchase. August 4th will be an evening with the council that will be the voting board and body in the town of Braintree on both the appropriation for the CPC purchase as well as the rezone. If those are successful, there will be things that will happen after the, or I should say before the purchase, as far as creating the parcel that we'll buy. We have to do an environmental review. We need to complete any restrictions that are required. We need to also engage, I think we describe it as a steward who is going to hold the open space restriction on a portion of the property. On the development side of things, the front portion of the lot, if developed for a CVS, will be subject to planning board permitting and site plan review. And what site plan review is you need to prepare things like a site plan, which shows the location of the building, the parking spaces, the entrances, landscaping, utilities, dumpster locations, walls, fences, everything that basically is part of the construction and the site work associated with the property, both at grade and as well as below grade for utilities and drainage and things. The planning board also at that point will get things like light studies, traffic reports, stormwater reports, and we will review those to make sure that if this development is approved at this location, that it's not going to have future negative impacts. And I think something that also is important to note is it's not CVS's or any developer's responsibility to solve existing problems that currently, it's not their responsibility to make Liberty and Grove Street the most seamless intersection on the South Shore. But they have a responsibility to not make it any worse. And that's where we get into the technical reports from the professionals. The planning board also has the option, which we are doing right now on a project in Braintree, to hire our own consultants. That's called a peer review, which can review the traffic report and make sure that the person who prepared it for the developer is doing that appropriately, using industry standards, using the correct methodology. We can also use that for things like drainage reports, and we've done that in the past. And if we feel as though there is a concern with the materials on this particular project, and or if the planning board would like to pursue that, that's something that they can do. This site will also be subject to permitting from the Conservation Commission. Notice of intent, which is an application that's filed because there will be work undertaken in the buffer zone. So when we talk about wetlands, you have the actual wetland area, which is flagged by the wetland scientist, and then the area 100 feet beyond that actual resource area is the jurisdictional area. So I have seen some comments and things too. They're working in the buffer zone. That is allowed. Work in the 100-foot buffer zone is allowed. And that's something that is pursuant to an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. They look at impacts. They have the authority to mitigate impacts. And in very early discussions, not with the Conservation Commission, with the staff, and looking at the 40B plan, and those that are familiar with that, that development wraps entirely around the entire wetland area, and is on all four sides of that. If it had four sides, it's a little round and kind of a weird shape. This particular development is primarily located between Liberty Grove and the wetland that's kind of in the middle of the site, I guess is the best way to describe it. There also may be a need to obtain state permits from MassDOT related to access and curb cuts. So there is quite a bit of permitting that will be involved. Because something is allowed by right doesn't mean that you just pull a building permit and put it up. It means that you're subject to site plan review, which is very detailed and very involved when it comes to the subject matters that I talked about this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Santucci-Rosie. So fair to say, and you laid that all out very eloquently, but fair to say that we're in the very infant stages. This is an important step forward. It's a big step forward, but for townspeople that are worried about this, there's a lot of steps that are going to continue along the way to ensure that certain procedures are followed. And so we're, again, just sort of starting out. And
Correct. And I think it's important to note that a rezone does not permit a development. It changes the zone that then says you go to the zoning bylaw and this is what you have to do in this zone. It does not enable the construction of anything.
And my next statement, and Councilor Shasha, I see that your hand is up, so I will get to you next. Mr. Clements, I want to thank you for the work that you've done on this. I know that this has been quite the labor for you and both Attorney Monestino. I know that over the years, there's been various proposals that are put out there. They've been met with resistance. I appreciate the fact that there is a 40B that you have this approval for and that you're continuing to work with the town. And I know this whole piece of property as a site have been a lot of contention over the years. So I do appreciate the fact that you've worked with the town and you've continued to sort of move forward to try to do something at that intersection that is business related. And I personally am appreciative of that. I am in receipt of a letter from an attorney, Matthew Gaines, who represents one of the individuals that sort of abuts this property. And I'm also in receipt of a letter from your attorney, Michael Monestino, that sort of responded to that. So I'm appreciative of what both attorneys did in terms of outlining some issues. But as we said, a lot of folks in this area are now sort of on board. And I know that Councilor Mackin is the District 6 councilor, and this is an issue that he's dealt with during his campaign and then after. I know a lot of the neighbors are on board at this right now. But they're obviously, you're never going to please everybody. There are some people that still have issues. And I understand that those folks, I've talked to some of them even today, and I know that they have some legitimate issues that they want to see addressed. So I just want to get some assurances from Mr. Clements, and again, thank you for all the work you did, and from Attorney Monestino. There will be some continuing discussions with some of those folks. Is that accurate, Mr. Clements?
Yeah, so thank you first and foremost, thank you for that. But, just in perspective, yes, of course, I think a show of good faith is what we've done at this point. I've met and I've sent to the council, I met on July 8th with Mr. Prohl, the abutter. But he's been involved in this process for 3 years. We're respectful of his concerns. And of course, and I understand Mr. Gaines' concerns relative to curb cuts and certain things, but I'm not certainly qualified to make those decisions. We're going to ask the professionals, the qualified individuals to design and develop, as we did with the 40B, a project that best serves our community. And once we get to that, there is a series of hearings that will be scrutinized by the planning board, and as Melissa said, perhaps even the state relative to curb cuts. There are issues ongoing. We're always willing to work with the abutters. I think that's demonstrated through the 3 years that we've tried community outreach. And it's also enhanced by the fact that I'm here in attendance this evening. So you have a commitment from me. Within reason, we want to be good neighbors. And if we weren't good neighbors, we would not be here this evening. So yes, you have a commitment from me. We will put our best foot forward and work with the community as well as the Prohl family to make sure that this is a project that makes sense for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. Councilor Shasha, you had your hand up. It did go down. Do you have any further comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And I see that Councilor Mackin has used the raise hand function. Councilor Mackin, do you have additional comments or questions?
I do. So I had been going to bring up that letter Attorney Gaines wrote, which you already got to, per Mr. Clements' comment. I do believe there will be ongoing mitigations discussed, and he has already done that, and both parties have talked, and the attorneys can speak with each other. That's ongoing. Per Mr. Gaines's letter, and Melissa and Christine, were you guys in receipt of that?
Yeah.
Yes, we're a counselor.
He made 2 comments in there about possible alternative plans. I didn't know if you guys wanted to address those right now, if they were just not possible or if they were possible. But
I would,
I
if you
don't know
don't
if
mind,
that's a
Councilor
site
Mack.
plan issue for later either, but, George, I don't know if you were just here for what I just said before.
No, but I would like to address those concerns, Councilor Mack, and, there is a breaking point with all things. There was a lot of time, effort, and thought that went into this alternative plan, and unfortunately, I know Mr. Gaines just came into this, this project. Some of the statements he made were certainly sensitive to his statements, although I'm not sure he's really evaluated the plan in its entirety. And just a very quick, for instance, he talks about buffer. One thing that he fails to disclose, or maybe he has not educated himself to the properties is a larger picture. Right now, we share with the proles over 300 linear feet of property bounds. Through this alternative plan, we're actually reducing our property line from the proles from 300, what's actually 375 feet, which we own right now. We're reducing that down to 285 feet. So it's unfortunate that Mr. Gaines has not taken the time to really look at that. But I look at it and I say, if I were the direct abutter to this property, I would certainly look at it as a benefit that the rear yard where the proles have their pool and the use and enjoyment of their backyard is being protected as part of this plan. It gives them over 100 or close to 100 feet of buffer from the CVS all the way up to Thetford. If we were to go with the 40B development, the proles would not have any buffer in their backyard and would actually be looking upon a parking lot as well as Thetford Street. Under this alternative program, we're fortunate, and Melissa, myself, the mayor, Christine, we all discussed that, and we said, yeah, of course there's a benefit. That is your first initial buffer. So we are conscious that, yes, there has to be some buffer, but some of the challenges, and it needs to be said, is I did not build the abutting house. And if I did, I would not put my garage less than 2 feet from a property line. I would not put a driveway right on a property line or possibly encroach on another's property line. Now, if it was built to today's standards, the Proles house, then we wouldn't have buffering issues. The problem that we have right now is we have a driveway that straddles my property line and actually encroaches onto my property. I have a garage that is non-compliant. So there's zoning issues that were created long ago when the Proles house was built. We've met with the Proles. We recognize their concerns. We want to work with them. We've already, I've sent a memo to all the councilors. We are looking at undertaking relocation of the Proles driveway, which is, which quite frankly is not in a proper placement. The other problem that the Proles are experiencing are at the end of their driveway, there is a mound of ledge that they need to actually drive into a passing lane just to see if somebody's coming down Grove Street. So I guess what I'm trying to express is, if there's a standard to be held, you should judge my past actions to look at what the future is. But yes, we'll work with them closely.
Thank you, Mr. Clements. Before Larry, one second. So thank you, Mr. Clements.
I think you must have started when I spoke, but I know I did acknowledge the mitigations you're making. I was not implying otherwise. But you know what? We'll listen, Christine. We can leave that one alone for now. That sounds like we can deal with those issues later.
All right, thank you. And so, Councilor Mackin, you've been recognized for 3 times. I would defer to Councilor Flaherty one last time for the 3rd time. Councilor Flaherty, I believe you're muted.
Thank you. I just needed to unmute myself. I think it's important to remember that the interest of CVS is not a done deal. And so I'm curious to know 2 things. One is, if CVS backed away from the interest that it's demonstrated in this project, what would be the thing that perhaps Mr. Clements would pivot to? And also, assuming that CVS, continued to be interested and wanted to work to build a CVS there, and how long would their commitment be? You know, what would be the long-term expectation for a presence of CVS on that corner?
Thank you. Well, let me answer that for you, if I may. The amazing part of this alternative plan requires me to sit on this property for yet another 3 years until I have a full-on commitment and construct this CVS. So there's a lot on my plate. Now, we're starting to, and cards being straight up here, we're starting to reassess our position relative to this entire alternate proposal. We've tried to show good faith, and we want to continue to show good faith. But if CVS were to drop out, and that's a very valid question, we may need to look at, we may need to say, let's pull the comprehensive permit. Let's take a look at how we can, in fact, or if we can, and quite frankly, CVS is, CVS is very much interested. We want to work this through. We believe we can work it through, and I'm sure we'll find a way forward. This is a very valuable piece of real estate. It's a four-corner business intersection, but we're committed to it. So we'll leave it at that.
But
Thank
the second part of my question, how long would CVS commit initially? It wouldn't be for infinity.
Yeah. So to answer your question, quite frankly, just frankly, is CVS is not committed. CVS is watching how these hearings are conducting themselves. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Cumberland Farms wanted this site, and once the neighborhood opposition and all of these things came about, they passed on the opportunity. CVS is a big corporate brand, so they're watching how these meetings are going, and they're saying, do we want to be part of that? I don't have a full-on commitment from CVS. What CVS is committed to is if I do the following steps, then they're willing to give a commitment. If they start feeling that they're not a welcome neighbor in the community, well, then they're okay. They'll pull their commitment. They need certain commitments from the community. They're not going to sit back and say, okay, and quite frankly, I'm going to put it out there. When we start seeing neighbors that get a little bit anxiety, we respect that. But I think we're going to work hard, and I believe CVS is our user, and we're committed to it as the planning and the mayor's office is.
What I'm trying to understand is, let's say that the CVS did follow through and you built a CVS there. There would be an arrangement. You would be their landlord, so to speak, right?
That's correct.
So how long would that contract be for? Like, what would be the standard term for that?
That's a premature question, but I think their standard lease is 25 years with extensions, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. And I'm hopeful we can get to the negotiation. It's kind of the chicken and the egg. You're asking questions about what their terms will be. There are no terms available right now because we are not that far down the path.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you to all the counselors. I've now recognized each counselor 3 times. I'm assuming that there's no further questions from the counselors. Attorney Modestino, I see that you have now appeared. I didn't know if there's anything additional you wanted to add or if Mr. Clements covered it all. You're muted.
Here we go. If I may, Councilor Ringus, thank you for the time. And other councilors, thank you for your input. I would simply add a couple of things. I mean, this is a good plan for the town overall. There's a lot going on here at the same time. And I think the traffic studies will resolve themselves. They tend to be very expensive and time consuming and complex. And I think they'll address all the concerns, and that will come out during the site plan review. It will be required by the town in order to get approval from the planning board. And I think we have to look at that. The plan to convert the back lots into the conservation purposes and the house lot at 1006 Liberty Street for historical purposes, I mean, that is a good deal for the town because as a result of that, the town of Braintree, and I live in the town of Braintree, and I have great concerns about the town, will be at the safe harbor level in terms of 40B housing in the future to future applicants. And, you know, the proposed site is a single-story structure. It will look attractive as much as a retail store can be. And it will have, as I understand it, only one curb cut required onto Grove Street. It will have a drive-through pharmacy, which is very important to CVS. It's one of the reasons that CVS is very serious about moving to this location. There are other, well, one store in Braintree over by Cape and Circle does have a drive-through, but the other two, the one in South Braintree and the one over at the Stop and Shop Plaza, do not have drive-throughs and could not have one at those locations. I think CVS is really committed to this thing. And from what I understand, they're watching it very closely, and hopefully we can move forward on it. I think in concerning the Prowls, the neighbors, they have legitimate concerns. They're direct abutters. There's no question about it. But I think we can address those things. We're trying to address them. And I have a meeting. I'm on vacation this week, as is Attorney Gaines, but he and I have arranged through emails to have a meeting on Tuesday morning when both of us are back here to discuss these things and to find out how we can mitigate the concerns that the pools have. And hopefully those discussions will be successful and we can move forward and they'll be reasonably satisfied. And I mean, that's about it. I mean, I just think that the whole process needs to play out. We're at the beginning of the process. There's a lot more to go. And I would simply ask your committee to give approval to the rezone request. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Montestino, and I appreciate the efforts that you and Attorney Gaines for those abutters are working together to try to address some of those concerns. I think that's admirable, and hopefully there can be some fruition out of that. Just as a note, this is a public meeting, but it's not a public hearing per se. The full public hearing for this will be held on August 4th currently, unless something changes at the council meeting, on August 4th at 7:30 p.m. And that will be a time to readdress any issues that any of the councilors had tonight, and for the other councilors to sort of weigh in on how they feel. But whenever I chair a meeting, I never want to, even though it might not be a true public hearing, I don't like to let anyone not speak their mind or sort of get their commentary heard. Most of the folks that are attending this Zoom, because I can see them, are panelists. We do have 7 attendees, so I would just take a moment if any of the attendees wanted to use the raise hand function to make a comment before we go to the motion and any sort of voting that might need to occur tonight. So I'll just take a minute and see if anyone wants to make use of that raise hand function. All right, so no one did. So at this point, people may be holding their commentary back. They may be digesting. Of course, anyone who's a neighbor or an abutter has the ability to weigh in at the full council meeting. And so at that point, I do see that Councilor Shasha has raised his hand. So Councilor Shasha for now the third time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, somebody had sent me a message that they were trying to speak and were not able to get through. So I don't know, Clerk Semino, if you can give them instructions on how, if they're on phone only, how they should raise their hand.
They could send me a text if they like to, or call my phone and I can get that message to all of you. The phone number that they can text or call is 339-987-2726.
So we'll hold for a moment if that individual wants to send a text to Clerk Semino. And again, to that individual, obviously you will have the ability to weigh in at the full council meeting if need be. There's something. So just going to hold for one moment. Sometimes Zoom can be a little awkward. And while we wait, I just wanted to note that in our attendees, District 5 Councilor Meredith Bowrecker is one of the attendees. She's not part of this committee, but she is obviously keeping a close eye on this, so we thank her for her diligence and effort on behalf of the residents of Braintree. And I think, Ms. Semino, you may have connected the person in question.
Yes. So, hello, Jill, can you hear us?
I can, yes, thank you.
Could you just identify yourself?
Jill Coyle, Parkside Ave.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle.
And I just wanted to make a comment regarding the project itself and listening to the feedback tonight. I am absolutely amazed at the amount of work that was done with this project and the negotiations that went on. And I'd like to thank staff, specifically Assistant Director Santucci Rossi, for all the work. There was a lot of thought put into this by working with the applicant and by utilizing the CPA funds for the town's benefit. As the applicant has stated, all four corners of this intersection are zoned general business, and I have no doubt that once the master plan process begins, goes through and is finished, there will more than likely be a recommendation to rezone that parcel similarly to what was recommended in comp zoning. So I would like to just say that I hope that you will support the rezone, as it is in the best interest of the town and the abutters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coyle. With that said, all the councilors have weighed in, all the panelists have weighed in, and everyone in attendance has had the opportunity to weigh in. We do have a vote one way or the other to take tonight. Do I have a motion from Councilor Shasha?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would like to make a motion that the town council vote at the request of the mayor of the town of Braintree and Liberty Grove LLC, with consent by Eugene K. and Linda A. McIsaac, to amend the zoning map of the town of Braintree by rezoning from Residence A and Residence B districts to the general business district certain portions of the following lots. Assessors Parcel 1109, Lot 6, identified as 357 Grove Street. Assessors Parcel 1109, Lot 6A, identified as 1006 Liberty Street, and Assessors Parcel 1109, Lot 6B, identified as 365 Grove Street. The portions of said lots that are to be rezoned are shown on a plan entitled Rezoning Plan at 357 and 365 Grove Street, 1006 Liberty Street in Braintree, Mass. Prepared by Hardy and Mann Design Group, PC, dated June 22nd, 2020, which is on file with the town clerk. The acreage to be rezoned is approximately 1.23 acres, including approximately 0.72 acres of Assessors Parcel 1109, Lot 6, 0.02 acres of Assessors Parcel 1109, Lot 6A, and 0.49 acres of Assessors Parcel 1109, Lot 6B.
Thank you, Councilor Shasha. I have a motion from Councilor Shasha. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilor Mackin. Clerk Semino, could I have a roll call vote?
Counselor Ringus,
I'll vote aye.
Counselor Sasha,
Yes.
Counselor Flaherty,
Yes.
Counselor Mackin.
Aye.
That's 4 in favor, 0 opposed.
And that is unanimous. Thank you to all the parties here tonight. Thank you to Mr. Clements, Attorney Montestino, the staff from the town and the councilors for a thorough discussion and a lot of, I think, great questions and debate. Obviously, for the general public and those listening, like I've said a couple times now, this will now go with an affirmative vote back to the full council for public hearing on August 4th at 7:30 p.m. That is the only item that we had on the agenda tonight. Just for members of the Ordinance and Rules Subcommittee, we do have probably a little bit of a busy summer coming up. We're going to have a couple other issues that are going to come before us in terms of another rezone. And then I believe at some point we will be addressing the plastic bag ordinance, which we had put on hold because of the COVID-19 and reusable bags being banned. That ban has recently lifted, so it is something we could at some point look to readdress. So I think we will have a couple other meetings coming up. With that said, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Shasha. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from Councilor Flaherty. Clerk Semino, could I have a roll call vote?
Counselor Ringus,
Aye.
Counselor Sasha,
Yes.
Counselor Flaherty,
Yes.
Counselor Mackin,
Aye.
all in favor.
And that is unanimous. Thank you to all, and we will see you on August 4th. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
Thank you as
much.
well. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Good night.